Hey, today's guest is Neil Crawford, the co-founder of Uneric, a company that's not just building software, but reshaping the Salesforce ecosystem. Uneric is acquiring, integrating, and scaling product after product into a single, unified platform that combines UX, AI, and speed like no one else. If you want to understand how modern SaaS giants are being built, this episode is your blueprint. Okay, so I'll take it back. So Neil, we were talking before, but I was researching for you online. I like to call it stalking also. And your journey, your professional journey is a pretty steep climb. I mean, you started as a developer, working with Java from IBM. You started going into the more Salesforce related development area in a sense. And then you started NC Squared, right? Which you actually exited after a good couple years. And how was that journey? What can you tell us about it?
Good. I went from software development at IBM, like you said, doing Java development. It was mostly enterprise style projects, so working on projects for the larger clients. In general, really enjoyable, great bunch of people, made some lifelong friends there. So, really kind of good part of life. Um, but on the technology side, what I was seeing was that these projects were quite slow to roll out. So they took quite a long time to develop and then a long time to get in front of customers. So that cycle of iteration was very long. Meanwhile, a friend of mine was working for Salesforce as it had just started out and was immediately rolling out project after project, super quick. And as I looked at it, it was clear that this was much more future looking and a quick way to get solutions out to customers. So made the leap over to the Salesforce ecosystem, originally working building products for other people, but bumped into another Neil while I was working there. And we were very like-minded. We'd have lots of discussions on our lunch breaks about maybe we'd build our own applications and what would we build and all that kind of stuff. So we did that. We launched it. We started working on our own product. We thought originally we would build a suite of products for Salesforce. But as we started down that rabbit hole, we realized that one product the requirements end up going deeper and deeper and deeper. And to do a good job on a product, you really need to focus. So that's what we did. We carried on building that product. It was very much in conjunction with customers. So we would build a feature, we would validate it with customers. Often the requirement for that feature would come directly from customers. Particularly in the US, they were very friendly and forthcoming about exactly what they wanted. So that was very enjoyable working with them to develop something that they really needed, and they really appreciated how responsive we were. So together with those early cohort of customers, built a really nice product, great product market fit, and then it just expanded from there. Kept finding more and more customers, and really it was just execution, just doing a good job, and then that helped the company grow. So we got to about 20 people in total, and the whole thing was bootstrapped. So we didn't really have the skill set at that time to start raising money and know how to deploy that money effectively. So I think bootstrapping was the right choice for us for that business, and learned a lot. Did sales, did marketing, did customer success, did support, learned about legals, learned about information security, all the kind of things that go around the product that I didn't previously have experience of just doing development. So great experience. And then we exited that about 3 or 4 years ago, I think now. And then, the next phase began.
That's awesome. As a founder, Neil, I'd like to ask you, there's this vision for some of us that the startup founding life is I don't know, you've certainly seen it's like, oh, you have to wake up super early and then all you do is think about it. I know, take cold showers or something. You don't
Yeah.
eat for a full day. How realistic is that let's say startup mentality thing that we see
Yeah,
nowadays?
I think a lot of that is, I don't know, that's how to do something, isn't it? And those things have merit. Like I've definitely been through periods where it's helpful to get up early. I've got a young family. It's actually quiet early in the morning, and that's helpful. A cold shower is helpful. You get used to discomfort. All those things, like they're fine. They're all useful things, but on their own, they're nothing to do with actually running a business or what you're going to do as part of a business. They're just useful life skills, perhaps at certain phases of what you're doing. So I guess it's attractive in terms of sharing content and how you ought to be, and it's a kind of motivation tool, I suppose, to G yourself up because you're going to have to work hard. So you sort of, sometimes you need to get yourself G'd up to push on and do those kind of things. So I think they're helpful in that way. But I suppose the only thing I would say to that is not to kind of misunderstand that as being the only thing you have to do. That's more like once you've decided what you're going to do, that's a way of helping you keep the energy going in order to do it.
Okay, so it's not necessarily the cold showers, it's everything around it. Okay. Yep, I have been fooled by TikTok. Well, Neil, talking about that exit, you have a young family, you've mentioned that. I would imagine that there's no really sabbatical year after an exit. It's how's that journey? How's the day after?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I suppose I kind of sometimes relate it to films or movies, that the ending feels like the end, but in real life, there's a next day, isn't there? So it's good. It's nice. It's nice to exit. It's nice to feel that sense of accomplishment and to have achieved something that you set out to do. That's a good feeling. And then the human condition inevitably is like, now what? And then yeah, like you said, with family life, you can't do nothing anyway. But with family as well, you've got day-to-day life very much continues on. There's no kind of disappearing off to a beach for 6 months. So that next phase can be quite challenging because you've been focused on something for so long, and then you're thinking, okay, now what? And in our situation, so the type of exit we went for, just because of the nature of our company and the journey we've been on with the people we've been on, we created something which I think is unique to the UK, but there's this idea of an employee-owned company where you can raise money to exit your company for the benefit of the employees of that company. So that gave us a kind of non-traditional exit and various next steps about what that company looked like in future, what everybody's roles were. So there were all kinds of things to work through there, which were fairly challenging. So yeah, it kind of went on from there, and then it got into a structure that was, the new structure, I guess, and then it carried on and took on a life of its own. So yeah, there was definitely work to be done, and I suppose that happens for any exit. Even if you join another company, it's right. How do I integrate with this company? What's my role? Who's doing what? So there's always the next step. So it's one of those kind of life reminders. It's very cliche, but it's about the journey and all that kind of stuff. It's incredibly difficult to actually do that and not focus on destinations, but it's just a reminder, kind of enjoying what you're doing and then think about what you're going to enjoy doing next.
Neil, is there any emotional attachment after an exit that you have to work on? I mean, you've started something, you've created it, you've seen it grow, and now it, in a sense, grows without you. Is that how's that
it's
like?
it's kind of your baby. For me personally, I didn't really sort of struggle to let my baby go. I suppose it wasn't too bad, but it kind of gets attached to you, and in a sense, I always kind of wanted it to be something that lived its own life rather than it being my thing. So I was personally fine with that. I think other people sometimes feel like they want to work in a certain way and struggle to let that go. That was less of an issue for me personally. But yeah, I think for me, it was more so having that work so closely with that group of people for so long, of going, okay, how do I now go on to the next venture? So yeah.
I imagine there's certainly a lot of work put into the exit in a sense of, okay, this company, how will it continue? How do we organize it? So I would imagine it's not like, oh, one day you're there, the other one you're not. It's just, I'm gone.
There's always a phase
I think
out.
that's it, right?
I imagine some people do disappear on the next day, but generally speaking, done well, there's a handover period and a kind of settling in of the next set of leadership. So yeah.
Awesome. And then you moved and started Uneric, right? How was that move? How soon was that after? And what was the build up until Uneric?
So I had a period where I was kind of tapering down from the previous business and doing bits and pieces. I was kind of helping other people on different projects and doing little bits and pieces, just kind of experimenting of where I felt like I was just trying things of what might I enjoy in future. So I was kind of open to not immediately finding the next thing and just sticking my toe in various different projects. Um, and then a guy who I had known previously who'd been on a similar journey in terms of running a bootstrap company on the Salesforce ecosystem, James Castine. His exit from his Salesforce company had been through a merger with another similar company. So he'd had success with that, and that gave him that light bulb moment of this idea of merging smaller companies together to create something that was greater than the sum of its parts. So as he left there, he had that light bulb blinking away. So he'd been working on that idea, and then he contacted me to talk it through, and it made perfect sense to me because I'd been on that bootstrap journey and seen what are the limitations of not raising money. That I'd kind of had that idea of like, oh, I don't want to kind of engage with that world. I just want to do my own thing, which was fine, but that does present limitations. And I experienced the reality of building products. It's not just a product. You need to build a business around that product. You need to build all these other functions in order to do something great. So I was very well aware of what was needed. And then he'd met two other co-founders who were from a very different space. So they were more on the investment side, finance, M&A, all that kind of stuff. So they had experience of raising money, acquiring businesses, doing all the legals and all the transactional stuff that requires to buy businesses. James had experience on the sales side. That was his background, and I come from the technical side. So between the four of us, we got a broad set of skills that enabled us to take on this idea of Unaric, which is really focused on building a platform of applications for Salesforce. So rather than just one application, a whole suite of applications to support customers. Because at the moment, the ecosystem, as it's grown so quickly, it's quite fragmented. It's quite difficult for customers to know what to buy and how to integrate them all together. So there's a gap there for someone to really build a nice platform of industry apps.
I was about to say that scalability seems to be a very important pillar of Unaric, but it would be interesting. One thing I've learned, Neil, is that when talking to founders, I can set the tone for how we get into like, what's the company about? What's the startup about? But I think the best way is straight up asking a founder to get the maximum out of the founder's mind. So I'll ask you, Neil, what is Unaric?
So Unaric has two missions depending on the audience. I would say one is for founders like my previous self to join a business that has the structures that they need to continue their journey and reach scale with their applications. So to create the business vehicle around a product and bring that to market and get that into more customers using it. So that's for the founders that are potentially joining Unaric. For customers, it's really about simplicity and unification. So it's about bringing together lots of disparate applications and offering a nice seamless experience for customers so they can find everything they need under one roof. And that includes simplifying and unifying things, including the user experience and making it scalable and making the products easy to install and use, and single support team and single legal contract, all those kind of things. That just makes it easier, in particular for enterprise customers who even internally struggle to do battle with procurement and infosec and legal and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. And are you guys, I'm imagining there's a good chunk of development that goes into combining that ecosystem, but are you guys also creating new solutions, not just taking, let's say, integrating proven existing ones into an ecosystem where it makes sense? Are you guys creating as well?
So as we buy a business, you get more than just the product. So you get the product, but you also get the customer base and all the information that comes with that customer base of what's working for them, what's not working for them, what do they want to do, how close is this product to product market fit? Is the ideal product slightly different to the one we've currently got? So we've got that kind of evolution of the current product, but then we also have an opportunity to create the next generation of that product where it makes sense. And then obviously the hot topic of AI presents another opportunity there. So for some of these products, we might want to leap straight to an agent or have a complementary agent for that same bit of functionality. So, for example, one of our products is around equipment tracking for people that are, they have a lot of new joiners in various industries. So some of them will be happy using a traditional user interface, but often you have a new junior person joined. It's actually easier to talk to a conversational AI rather than having to learn how to use a tool. So for a lot of these products, we jump straight to building an agent as well, and then look back at the UI and see where that needs to go.
And talking UI, I imagine some of the challenges that you might face are also related to that. So you're combining different functionalities, literally different companies into an ecosystem of its own. What's the struggle with UX and UI? How do you combine them? Let's say, how do you physically or digitally actually combine those different parts of programs?
So there's various, integrating companies is a thing in its own right, and the people involved and the processes, that's a whole field of itself. In terms of the product, trying to get a consistent user experience is key. So that's where we've worked with you guys with Esfera, building style guides to understand the vision of here's what we want Unaric to look like. Salesforce itself has some standards, so we can lean on those and give them some of our own flavor. So firstly, it's about creating that vision of where we want to go. We can't always get there in one step. Sometimes we have to wait for companies to be ready to release things, all that kind of stuff, but at least to be clear where we'd like to go. And then there's obviously the development work to get towards that vision. Salesforce has a pretty consistent way of developing user interfaces, so that's helpful. And then other applications, variety of technologies being used. So there's a kind of process of standardizing those things as time goes on. But yeah, the key is really to start with that vision of where we want it to go and what do we want our brand to look like and what's the Unaric user interface.
Neil, something you said got me thinking. I imagine that every time you bring in a new company, so new functionalities and also new users to the Unaric ecosystem, I'm imagining those new users also impact essentially everything else that you have. So have you noticed that demands or needs of users for applications that you guys currently had changed because new users came into the ecosystem? Is it an ever-evolving suite?
I think so, yeah, definitely. The kind
Crazy.
of the average user is changing dramatically with each acquisition, I guess is one way of framing it. So when you're growing purely organically, it's a gentle process. You might, as a product, start to get more enterprisey. The nature of your ideal customer profile, your persona might start to change over the years. Acquisition is suddenly a step, so it's like boom, okay, right now you've a whole new cohort of users has suddenly arrived, and they may have a different mental model of what they're trying to do and all slightly different backgrounds. So that definitely happens, and I think in the portfolio there's a split between products that are completely sales led, so they're kind of enterprisey products and they've always been that way, and the salesperson explains how it works and kind of explains the value and sells it into a company, and that's fine. And then there's another cohort that much more PLG. People are finding them on marketplaces. It's individual users quite often that are installing a thing, and then their colleague tries it, and it sort of grows in a more viral way. So there's a split in how people find us depending on those kinds of things, and that gives a very different dynamic to what they're expecting.
It's such a rich environment. And I'm not the one handling any projects related to UX. I know our company is helping you with that, but I now envy, in a good sense, who is leading that project, because that must be very, very interesting to adapt to. And Neil, what's your view on UX? You guys certainly understand the importance of it. It's something you actively work in your suite. What's your view? Like, as Neil Crawford, what's your view on UX for your products?
Yeah, I think overall it comes under the umbrella of good customer experience. It's trying to build something the world wants that works in a way that's intuitive. Personally, I've come from an engineering background, so it's this, for me, a lot of things are about this idea of friction. So if you can build a machine that has low friction, that's a very efficient machine. And I think the same applies to UX. Can you can you reduce the friction between what people are expecting and what actually happens? If you've come along and you've been using Microsoft Word for your whole life, that mental model is there whether you like it or not. And if you try and ignore that and do a document in a different way, you're going to hit friction. So I think it's just understanding that and trying to reduce that friction so that it's intuitive, it's easy, and it's kind of efficient. I think making it pleasing is a slightly different thing, but that's also important that you do a demo and people, ideally, you have a little wow moment, something that's visually pleasing, that's that people sit up and go, oh, that's just a nice. It's bordering on art because it's like they just like it because they like it, and then they get back into the business of business. But I think that's also important. Sometimes I overlook that ability to do a demo, and they feel like, oh, some craft has gone into this. Someone actually cares about this product, and they've made it appealing. So it's not directly business related, but I think people just like it.
That's awesome. And going back to the vision of Uneric, what's the vision for Uneric? What are you guys as a company striving
Yeah.
for?
So it's really to take the Salesforce platform, which has been incredibly successful, and bridge the gap with industries that are using this day to day. So the evolution of Salesforce has been it's a tool for salespeople to make it a little more efficient, and then it's grown into a kind of enterprise database of customers. And because it has its own development language, it's very flexible. People can build all kinds of things on it. These enterprises have built all kinds of solutions on there. They've used global SIs to build complex integrations. There's a lot of work gone in there. But to deliver that in an easier way for companies to manage, so to take, a bit like phones or whatever it is, you just plug in modules for the things you need, you bring them in at the time you need them, and you can, as your use cases change, you can bring in more things and feel confident that they'll work together. And then importantly, that it's well supported. I think support is sometimes overlooked, but it was a key part of the success of my previous business that when customers needed something, support was there. It wasn't just a tick in the box, it was actually wanting to help them and solve things. So having that suite of mission critical applications to help industries, supporting them really well, caring about the user experience, just doing a good job all round, and then they don't need quite so much kind of bespoke stuff. They can focus on their own business and make progress that way.
I had a curiosity. So, as a new company enters the Uneric ecosystem, do you guys change that product as it fits into the ecosystem? Like, what's the level of changes that a product will receive, a system will receive entering the ecosystem? Is it adapted in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it varies product by product. So many of the products are already native to Salesforce. Their entire journey has been towards that end. Some of the others are more generic and they're kind of more recently pointed towards the Salesforce ecosystem. So personally, I believe in rich integrations. So rather than the kind of basic something like Zapier, which is fine, it does things quickly, you can connect lots of things together. The idea of a rich integration is more something that really is very aware of its context and gives the best possible user experience and requires the least amount of configuration to make it work. So a non-technical person can just come in, plug in this thing and start using it. So it's trying to make sure that products fit into that category of rich integration. So if they're not already there, to start to build that very specific user experience for Salesforce.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned AI, Neil. How is AI coming into play at Uneric and even at Salesforce at the
Yeah,
moment?
I mean, it's a fast moving landscape, as I'm sure everybody knows. Salesforce themselves are leaning very heavily into AI and the idea of agent force on the Salesforce platform. So at some point in the not too distant future, that will just become business as usual for people using Salesforce and any other business application, that you'll have your visual user interface and your conversational AI co-pilot. That's just already a fairly normal way of working. So for us, it's just acknowledging those two ways of interacting. I think they both have merit, that you might want to engage in a conversational way, or you might prefer to go down the visual road. So there's that kind of UX style of what is the channel in which you're interacting with some functionality. And then there's under the covers of how does it work? And that's more about automation and just making something work as seamlessly as possible, as quickly as possible. So that's just an architectural consideration for anything we build, is this best built with AI, or no need, there's just a mixture of possibilities in terms of technologies. I like metaphors, so it's like, you've got trains and cars. Trains still exist, they go very fast in a straight line. Nothing wrong with a train, you can get a lot of people to a destination very quickly. If you need more flexibility, a train is a terrible idea. Now you need a car. Nothing wrong, you don't suddenly remove all trains and everything is a car. So I suspect it will go along those lines, like an API works perfectly well. You don't need to replace an API with everything being an agent. That's not an efficient way of doing things, but you might find the flexibility of an agent is helpful that you in certain situations. And then finally, on the development side of things, how will we build software in future? So do we prompt our way towards creating code? Do we use AI in code reviews? All those kind of things. So working towards, on the engineering side, using AI as part of that development process.
I believe that's the last part of integrating AI into, in a sense,
Yeah.
a daily usage is something that probably all markets are using, because in UX we have this exact same paradox. How much do we use it right now? How much do we learn what's coming next? Can we use AI at the moment in tasks that we're still not using it? How efficient is it going to be? So I guess that's also, I can imagine the same conversation, Neil, between multiple kinds of people in different businesses, all trying to see, like, how, can we use this now? What's going on later?
I think it's just about being open-minded and curious and pragmatic as well, not being too much of an evangelist that you try and force everything into something that's not ready, but not being too much of a kind of Luddite and trying to avoid the AI wave that's coming and pretend it's not going to make things better. It's like finding that sweet spot of, trying things out and being realistic about when it's offering an advantage right now versus when it might offer an advantage in the future.
Yeah, on our usage here, we've certainly started using AI for a lot of things that obviously were not possible before. But it's interesting how it's automating some of the more manual tasks, like filling in a specific, let's say we're doing a prototype, we need a filler for multiple, I don't know, a table. AI in Figma, for instance, a very common tool used by designers, now gives us options to get that done in literally seconds, where 1 year ago, you would have a designer manually inputting things like text for 20 minutes in a screen. So some of the things are already here, and some others completely not here. I'm sorry, Figma, but some of the tech is just not there yet. But some is very usable. Yep. Neil, I'd like to explore a little bit the relationship of UX and the Salesforce native environment. Salesforce has its very unique presentation. I've used it previously, and a lot of people, most people I know, to be honest, in the digital environments have used Salesforce at one point or will use Salesforce if they haven't. How do you guys navigate having your products, but also adapting to the existence of the Salesforce experience?
Yeah, so Salesforce has the Lightning design system. So all its products use that design system, which is really helpful. Means that anything that's in there is generally following those kind of guidelines and using that framework. So it does give that consistency to users and to customers. And they update that. So there's a new version come out. So they're able to keep it fresh and without requiring too much development effort. You get the benefit of that as time goes on. Um, and then for us, there's not trying to recreate the wheel and go against that. So it's like respecting that and using that, but also applying our own branding and looking at ways that are specific to us. If there's things that we need to do that are beyond what Salesforce is doing in whatever field it might be, but we've got some very specific use cases. We've got applications that relate to payment orchestration and equipment tracking and all kinds of very specific things that might require their own UX. So there'll be some components that don't exist in Salesforce naturally that we'll add our own designs to.
Makes sense. Have you ever felt any limitations within that design system?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, having a blank canvas makes it easier in some ways to do exactly what you want to do, but equally, it's better to have that consistency. So there's definitely limitations, especially when you have a design system that's sometimes almost doing what you want, but missing the final mile of your thing you want. Then you're in a difficult position because you kind of have to recreate the whole thing to get the final mile. So that's usually the most challenging point. And if that design system is evolving as well, so it might come to give you the component you want. So sometimes there'll be cases where you do need to create your own component, knowing that they'll probably add one later on, but just for time's sake, you have to kind of do something bespoke.
Interesting. And talking about the acquisitions, is there any specific focus to what tools you guys plan to integrate in your suite of tools, or is it more of a, let's say, just rewriting that question, with the acquisitions that you guys do you have a strict defined plan on what kind of tools you want to expand your current tool set, or is it more of a free flowing acquisition where you check something and then you kind of adapt and see, that makes sense for us? How exactly goes that logic?
So building products through acquisition is very different in some ways to just building by building. Like if you were normally going to build a product, you would just start with your requirements and away you go. Building through acquisition, you have a vision for where you'd like to go, but it's a bit more like a jigsaw. You take the pieces in the order in which they're available and then start to find pieces that fit next to those pieces. And at some point, there'll be gaps that you cannot fill through acquisition. So at that point, you need to build into those gaps. So for us, the vision has been partly architectural, I guess, so that we have a foundation layer of integrations that can do cross-functional things around integration. So synchronizing your email and your calendar, your Microsoft Teams meeting and your Microsoft Teams events, and bringing a Microsoft ecosystem into Salesforce, which seems to be a common pain point. So there's this foundational layer of activity capture and data capture that feeds all the things that we want to do, especially with AI coming. Just bringing everything seamlessly into the platform is a key part. So products that help us get there has been key. And then there's more of the business functionality. So applications that serve a particular industry. So already we're starting to see organically certain industries emerging and starting to build for those industries. So we're seeing things like recruitment and staffing of certain needs on the Salesforce platform. We've got someone that's got expertise in that area and starting to shape the solutions towards the needs of those customers. Same kind of thing in healthcare, life sciences, starting to guide those solutions towards those verticals. So there's a kind of foundational component and finding good apps that just enhance Salesforce, and then that shaping it towards those industries.
Building through acquisitions must have some pretty unique challenges. What would you consider as one of the biggest ones for that methodology?
I think one of the big ones is the architecture. So in an ideal world, if you're a software architect, you would just build your platform, you would have everything standardized, and you would just add more of the same thing. When you're doing it through acquisition, obviously you're bringing in a different team. Even if the tech stack's exactly the same, they'll have a slightly different philosophy and who knows, slightly different coding standards or whatever it might be. So there'll be some differences that will come in with that company. So it's that process of integrating and standardizing and accepting that you might have some variations in tech stack as you do that. So it's that non-standard stuff that adds a layer of complexity to it.
Neil, let me grab. So we've covered some of the good chunks of the beginning that we had lost. Do you mind if I ask in the next question something related to what that, because we've talked about a lot about the usability and aspects for the final users, but I was curious also on what's it like for the acquired partner in a sense. So how exactly does that work? You acquire a particular company or let's say a product. Is that necessarily an exit for the partner involved in the original founder of that product?
For us in particular, no. What we're ideally looking for is founders that want to continue the journey. I think, bearing in mind my previous life as a bootstrap founder, there weren't many exits where you could continue your journey with support and have the platform to continue your product. The general options are kind of private equity, just kind of going faster, scaling up, having more people doing that kind of thing. But it's generally financial. They don't give you the plumbing, they give you the money. Same with VCs, or an acquisition by another software company who will be very opinionated about where they're going to put it, and they'll bring it into their stack and kind of merge it in as a feature or something like that. So there weren't many options where you could kind of slot it into a platform and have it continue its journey as part of something bigger. So that's really the goal for Unaric, to enable particularly the kind of technical product founders to slot into that ecosystem. And if they want to continue that journey, that's ideal for us, that we want them to kind of look after their product and let go of some of the things that they may not enjoy doing, like the finances and the legals and the support and all the other things. And the fact that we also take care of the investment side of things, all the functions of a business, HR, like it goes on and on. The scaffolding you need to grow a business is very large, and not necessarily the reason people built products or created a business. So
that sounds pretty fun, and that sounds like a dream. How do you guys choose like which products to acquire, who to integrate into the ecosystem?
Yeah. Initially, we need to grow. Partly we need to have customers. So the initial cohort were not just good products with no revenue or no customers. Like, to get going, we needed products that already had a product market fit, customer base, revenue coming in. So we needed to grow that side of the business first. So we needed initially that kind of financial profile to some extent, that companies and products that were at a certain point in their journey. As time goes on, there'll be, in our kind of jigsaw, there'll be more specific gaps where it's more about, okay, we just need to fill this technology hole. Would we like to build it ourselves, or is there somebody that's built this exact thing and passionately believes in that thing and knows all the intricacies of that thing, and they would like to join the platform, in which case that's great. We can bring them in to plug that hole. So the nature of companies changes over time. Things that are interesting as well are companies that have been very focused on a certain type of customer. So if they've been very focused on, one example was the kind of medtech healthcare area, just serving a niche set of Salesforce customers in a very specific way, that's a great launch pad for us to be able to add around that and say, okay, they're serving that customer base, they're doing one part of the things they need. What else do they need? How can we really make that experience great for that cohort? But to get certain kind of ICPs and personas is ideal.
It's amazing. Through the acquisition, you not only get new users, but you bring value to your existing users, and you scale what the users for that acquired product can now do. That's awesome. Very nice. That's pretty cool. What a cool project, Neil. And Neil, I like to explore also, the other sides of things, like when things do not generally go well, I personally and professionally think it's very inspiring to see how different founders deal with mistakes, or well, when things
Mm.
generally just don't work out. Uh, do you have any stories where you thought something was going to go great, but a potential acquisition, or how to integrate a product
Mhm.
into your ecosystem, and it turned out it didn't quite
Yeah,
work as
plenty.
planned?
I think the life of I mean, aside from being a startup founder or anything like that, I think just doing anything involves just overcoming hurdles. Um, so generally speaking, it's usually the case that you underestimate how complex something is going to be. That's been my experience. So, and that's helpful in some ways because it enables you to go and launch the thing. I'm kind of aware now that there will be obstacles. I just don't know what they are yet. So I'm kind of waiting for them and going, okay, there's going to be challenges. I don't know what they're going to be, but they're definitely going to be there. Um, it's often about people. Companies are built to build products or services. So they're built by people and they serve people. There's people in the mix all over, and people are human beings and they have personalities and all that kind of stuff. So it tends to be um, the people side of things is both the rewarding part and then also the challenging part of navigating all that. Um, and obviously with things like M&A, there's lots of people coming into a company and trying to meet all their needs and understand what kind of concerns they might have, all that kind of stuff. Really requires. I always knew it would require attention, but it's kind of yeah, it just makes you realize all the different people that are out there and what they want to achieve, and trying to align that into a company's mission. It's challenging in a good way, but it means we've now built a people function and starting to work through that and starting to understand what the needs of the group are versus the needs of the business. So I kind of knew that would be part of the mission anyway, but that's something that I've always been aware of. I think other things that are challenging, yeah, I can't think of too many specific examples, but I'm kind of at a point where I'm just waiting for the next one. I just kind of know they're coming, and I don't feel. I think in my previous business, I would feel surprised by challenges and kind of taken aback and kind of as if it was a problem, as if it was a mistake or something like that. Whereas now I feel like, yeah, that is the process of just going, okay, there'll be this obstacle and this obstacle, and just working through them one by one. And it's also the opportunity. It's like anything that's difficult is a hurdle that some people may not want to go over. So the more of those you go over, the more defensible the project is. If it's completely easy, it's not defensible. Anyone could do it. If it's difficult, the number of people willing to do it are getting fewer and fewer. So probably on a good track. So that's partly my barometer.
That's awesome. And if you had one message to someone who's founding a startup, or is in the early stages of a startup, or potentially trying to find market fit, or just the early beginnings, what would your main advice be? Or I'd like to paint this in this way: is if you could tell yourself when you were first
Yeah.
starting NC squared,
Yeah.
what would you tell
I mean,
yourself?
I did meet such a person who gave me some good advice, so I will replay their advice. Um, we were very early. We had we had our first customer, and we'd gone to an event, a Salesforce event, to try and find more customers. And our heads were full of strategies and how you should do a startup and this, that, and the other. And we spoke to a guy at the lunch table, and kind of he was an experienced business guy, and we were kind of chatting about various strategies. And he just said, look, guys, what do you have today? And we said, well, we've got one customer. He said, great, just look after that customer, don't worry about anything else, just look after that customer and do a great job. That's it. And we took that advice, we did it, and it was great advice. Like, just do the thing in front of you really well. It turned out that customer at the conference next year, we got a booth there. They came to our booth. a big prospect came along. That customer happened to be there. They took that prospect away and had a coffee with them, explained about the product, came back to our booth and said, okay, you've got a new customer here. They'd actually sold the product on our behalf. I mean, it wasn't always that
That's
easy, but it's just that idea of doing something well and not ignoring the customers in front of you in favor of some kind of strategy or YouTube thing or who knows what, just keeping your eye on the
mhm.
prize.
That is amazing. So, and whenever I get some kind of indication from a client to
Mm,
another or something like that, someone puts in a good word, it always feels personally that that's just like the biggest seal of
yeah,
approval that you are doing a good job, is that someone is like literally indicating like
yeah.
you to someone else. No one does that for something that
No,
they feel like it's not
yeah.
working, that it's
And it's
not
the
worth it,
simple
right?
stuff that's effective. I sometimes in the UK, there's a company, a plumbing company, not, a massively revolutionary AI business or anything. They do plumbing, and their
Just
mission,
plumbing. Yep.
their kind
Classic.
of, magic formula was turn up on time, be respectful, dress smartly, and do a good job. And they cleaned up like just it's not magic. It's like the bar is suddenly the number of people willing to just do those basics really well, it's not that high, and just by focusing on that they were extremely successful. And I think that applies to any industry. Like, people get very distracted by strategies, and just the execution is key.
And is there something that you learned later and that you really wish you had done? So, for instance, we have a good lesson, which is taking care of the
Mm.
customer in front of you. Is there something that you learned too late down that
I
journey?
think um like, running a business is very humbling in some ways. You find all the things you're not good at. It doesn't pull any punches in that way. You kind of find out about yourself, which is a good thing, arguably. And I think just going through that relatively quickly would be more helpful, to go, right, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. I am going to hire for this, or I am going to find like-minded people that are good at that because I know I'm not good at it, rather than trying to keep forcing yourself to be good at something that you probably know deep down is not your bag. So just to close those gaps with other people, even if they may be very different to you. So that the very nature of the gap you've got might mean that you're not naturally aligned to those people. But the fact is, as a team, you need that diversity. So to try and work that way.
Yeah, that's such a core advice. I remember in other episodes how important it became to
Mm,
assemble teams, right? You just can't scale, apparently, past the point just with yourself and maybe one or two people. You're gonna
yeah,
need to have more people, right? And just choosing that people is probably, I would say, one of the biggest decisions you can make in a company, getting the
yeah,
right team. How do you view
yeah.
that team
I
construction?
agree. I think it's not to become paralyzed and not to hire people, because there's a journey of discovering what works and what doesn't. It would be easy to spend too long deliberating on hiring somebody. I think it's, another difficult part of the journey is when it doesn't work out what to do, being able to make changes. That's extremely difficult, but that's, a skill to learn as well, and do that in a respectful way is, extremely challenging, and a thing to learn. So um, that's one of the harder parts, to have the courage to make selections and be diligent enough to try and make good selections, but to know that it's still going to be a bit of a lottery, and to be able to course correct and make changes as well. So that's a hard thing to do, um, and maybe even to, if it's too hard, to find people to work with that are better at that than you are. Like, for some people, that's just an obstacle. It's too far to be able to let people go, is just something they can't do. So um, to find a team that you're kind of comfortable with, that can cover all those different skill sets. But personally, like, building a team, I really like finding people that want to work together. It's just such a key thing, that if somebody comes in and has a colleague they really respect, or somebody that they've always wanted to work with but haven't been able to, They just have a common language. It just makes everything so much easier if they want to work together. So having a team that gels well is really key.
Neil, to close up our conversation, I have a question which I will already apologize.
Yeah.
I know it's very generalistic, but feel free to take your time on it. Neil, to you, what is success?
To me, I think success is freedom to be able to kind of live a life you want, I would say.
Well, that is a good definition of success, if I've ever seen one. Neil, thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us today. It was a pleasure. I took a lot of good insights. This is usually the type of call that I will, for the rest of my day, just reflect on a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So
Brilliant.
Thank you very much
Andre.
once again. Thank you. All right, Neil, I guess we have an episode. We have a good amount of very good materials for shorts. What we're doing is I'm going to get this to one of our editors. We have some in-house editing staff, and we ideally want to make some short content out of this. Usual social media-ish content, but with very good inputs from you. We'll edit the full episode, get it on our YouTube, and then we have the shorts. I can send you everything that we edit before we post it, just so you've had it and say, oh yeah, that's good. But also, Neil, if you have any parts of this conversation you feel like would be a good short video so that we can edit it, we can definitely do it on demand. Just let me know. I get it to the editor, and yeah. So I'll keep you updated, I guess, and Perfect. I won't post without talking.
Sounds good. Yeah, nice talking to you. Good experience. Cheers, Andre.
It's a pleasure.
Take it easy.
Have a good day. Thank you. I'll see you soon.